Hello, everyone. Welcome to another great presentation presented to you by the Crest Network. Today, we are going to speak a little bit about invoice documentation. My name is Misty Jones. I'm currently the Vice President of Disaster Equipment Incorporated. I have 25 years experience in the restoration field. And one of the things that I get to see with my job is I get to see a multitude of companies and their paperwork and help them through the process. So I have a little bit of an understanding about who has done what works, what doesn't work, etc. So today I'm hoping to share some of that knowledge with you so that you can grow your company into something that is unimaginable maybe to you at this time. So let me walk you through understanding invoicing. To do that, you need to first think about what your current process is. Do you have an electronic process? Are you old school with pencil and paper? Do you have an app or a system that you use, or maybe your accounting department uses, or maybe your field personnel use? And are they the same system? Do you go off checklist? So take a minute, think about those, because you're going to need to think about your current process while we visit the invoice process. The number one reason that people get invoicing wrong or late is friction. Okay? When you think about friction, you think about something that maybe is butting heads, rubbing together. So when you have friction, your workflow is not easy to follow. Maybe you have friction with your actual invoice paperwork, and it's not easy to follow the actual paperwork for an audit. So friction is anything that can cause you extra time and extra energy to produce the end product. It's also very, very irritating for the end user. So friction is something that we want to try to avoid. Amazon understood this. So it's why Amazon has grown to the giant that they are today with, yes, $638 million per day with their program. And what they did, they reduced friction for the customer by enabling the one-click buy swipe button. And they've patented that. But what that does is it makes it easy for us moms or women who love Amazon. It's our favorite. We can just simply click to add something to our cart and then swipe, and it's purchased and being shipped to our saved address. That's just amazing. It's just genius. So now, how do you reduce that friction to make invoicing and workflow happen that easy for your company? So here are some steps to look at when you go back and look at those processes that I had you think about before. One, you want to have a simple process. A lot of people think, oh, I got to have this and I got to have that and we got to do this. You got to send this to this person and send this to accounting, but yet this is your project manager. You need to send that to him too. So sit back, think about your process and simplify it. Okay, eliminate double doing. Double doing, if you know me, is my biggest pet peeve in my personal life, and is my greatest hatred in my work life. I don't like to pay people to double do something. I also don't like to pay departments to double do something. So if your accounting department, your accounts payable, who's in charge of credit cards, is not involved with your invoice process, that person has to look at a receipt, enter it in for your payables, and another person has to look at the same receipt to put it on your invoice. You're double doing. You do not have a simple process. So look at your processing systems and think, how can I make this easier where only one person is looking at this receipt to make sure that it gets entered in on our bill? That goes along with the integrated process. Make it easy for everyone. Okay? Eliminate unnecessary steps. So think about your step process, think about your current program, and I guarantee half of you can eliminate 50% of your steps when it comes to turning in the proper paperwork. Create a routine. Okay. This is where a lot of employees get very frustrated and have friction when it comes to project management and or maybe the accounting department, is there's no good routine, and Saturday morning comes along and your billing personnel are trying to produce an invoice on a large project and you don't have the proper paperwork or documentation to be able to produce that bill because there was no routine. So now that you're reaching out to that employee on Saturday morning, they now all of a sudden hate their job. Maybe they're hiking a waterfall. Maybe they're having a birthday party. Maybe they were sleeping in and having a cup of coffee. So now they're a little irritated because they feel like that they are reducing their own personal downtime because there's no routine. So let's eliminate that friction, create a routine. If they're on a project, when do they turn in their paperwork? How do they turn in their paperwork? Is there even any paperwork? Maybe they're using an app. Whatever it is, create a routine for those people in your operations department and the people in your invoicing department. Have those deadlines set. Don't let people take advantage of those deadlines. You take advantage of it one time, they'll want to take advantage of it a second time. So with my current company, on the morning of the fourth day, we have a deadline, and that deadline is we submit a bill for the first 3 days. Our next deadline is on the morning of the eighth morning. On the eighth morning, we submit a bill for the first 7 days. And every week after that, on the eighth day, we submit a bill for the week prior. That is our deadline. So with that comes a multitude of deadlines when it comes to labor logs, turning in time, how they get their receipts in those deadlines. So in order to make those deadlines happen, your company has to be able to communicate. Do you have one project manager that maybe loves to talk on the phone, and so he calls everybody, but maybe your guys are in PPE and can't always talk on the phone, so maybe a text message is better. But maybe you have a girl sitting in the accounting department and she really doesn't like anybody she works with, and so email is best for her. I definitely do not identify as that girl. Completely love emails. So whatever your communication process is, even on your job site, you need to simplify that process and make sure everyone uses the same type of communication. These things of reducing this friction for your operations department and your accounting department will inevitably create a much happier workplace. People will want to come to work. People, even with raising my kids, people think, oh, I like having a little bit of freedom. I like that they let me kind of do what I want to do. But in all reality, people love deadlines. People love guidance. And they love when they get the attention for adhering to those. So look at these 6 steps and think, how can I implement these steps into my current workflow? How can I reduce friction for my employees so that I can reduce friction for my accounting department when it comes time to put out an invoice? So reducing friction will help you accurately and timely create your invoice. If you have a bunch of friction, then whoever is creating this invoice from all this paperwork that also had friction to get, they're going to be very frustrated. And by the time that person is frustrating and trying to create a bill, they're probably not going to be focused on the items that they should be focused on because they're frustrated, right? I know in the morning when I get up, I can't focus on my day because I'm frustrated from waking up, or maybe I'm frustrated from a dream that I had. So, the first thing I do is I make a cup of coffee. and I sit down and I think about how my day is going to go or the things that I have to get done. But if I'm frustrated, a lot of times it's hard to focus on those and things will get left out of your bill. So let's hop to it. So what is an invoice? A lot of people do not have the right perception of what an actual invoice is. So an invoice is only one page. That's right. I know you think I'm probably insane right now, but an actual invoice is only one page. That one page should be broken down into categories of what your documentation shows that you're billing for. So those inventories can include your billable labor, any associated labor fees you may have, such as small tools, your materials and consumables. These are the things that you kept inventory of on your project. Your equipment and tools should also be kept separate. Those are the things that have the daily rental fee on your job site. And then your reimbursable items, which some people refer to those as pass-through items. Again, here we're talking about a time and material type invoice. So on this one-page invoice, you definitely want to include your payee information and your payor information. Okay, make sure those things do not get left out. And you should also have your project information left on here. Make sure you have a due date on your invoice. Otherwise, it's not a true invoice. So they need to know, hey, this invoice is due in 15 days. This invoice is due in 30 days. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for grounds of, oh, maybe I'll pay you next year. Okay, so make sure you have a good due date on your invoice. Probably the next most important thing that your invoice should have is the total amount due for all of your services. So all those little categories, which I have 5, should add up, and that total should be on your one-page invoice. It should be a simple invoice. It should be something that you can skim at and go, oh, equipment cost this much. Labor was this much. Okay, keep it simple. And it also should have payment options on here. If you want them to remit only checks, make sure you have an address and a company for them to remit payment to. If you also take wire transfers, have that information on this one-page invoice where they can get to that information and send you a wire transfer. Some companies now have set up PayPal, Venmo, or apps that allow their clients to go online and actually pay their invoice online. If you're going to offer that, that's great. Welcome to 2022. But make sure that that information, how they can do that, is on your one-page invoice. Now comes the invoice documentation and that backup. Okay, so this is where you're going to detail out your labor items, your equipment items, your reimbursable items, and with those you should have a total page for labor. Then you should have the labor report, and then you should have a copy of your labor backup. Same thing for reimbursable items. These things are best organized by date. Some companies organize them in alphabetical order. That's fine. Create a system that works for you. I find with a multitude of people, organizing them in a spreadsheet by date works best for me. So an example of a cover page for one of those categories I'm using today is for equipment and tools. Now this one may not match the previous invoice where I just pulled examples for you today. So this one's the equipment and tools. It includes a total. Behind that, then I have lined item out the different types of equipment that I had on this project, how much of them I had, and notice that these are organized by date, and they'll appear like this for every day that they're on the invoice. The order will not change. At the bottom, I have my total, which should then match your total on your equipment and tools, which then should match that total for that line item on your one-page invoice. You would then submit in your signed equipment logs or your equipment report, as some of these apps do, behind that line item detail that they can go in and see. So speaking of reports, the reports back up your invoice items. They prove that you did your scope of work that you agreed with your client that you would do. And these reports should have a page-numbered table of contents. In other words, once I see that one-page invoice, I should be able to behind it see a table of contents so that if I'm looking for a labor log for 7/18/2021, I know exactly which page to turn to. Okay, that seems a little daunting. It's very hard to create spreadsheets sometimes and do an accurate table of contents. My first days I started, I did an electronic table of contents. And in other words, each page was saved separately. It was organized by name and date, or date to name, however you choose to do it. And then you could rearrange them in the Adobe system to create an electronic table of contents. Nowadays, a lot of companies have seen that this is a huge must, and they now, once you import all the data, create a report, which now includes a table of contents. Systems aren't for everyone. Some people really like pen and paper. So think about, if you're sticking to pen and paper, how can I easily create a table of contents? So come up with a form where you can easily edit those page numbers and create those for your invoice when you get ready to send it out. Excuse me. So some of my favorite companies on here that do really good drawing reports is Encircle, Clean Claims is one. Accelerate is a really great CRM to use. Currently, some companies use Company Cam. If you have a very simplified company, maybe very small, Company Cam is now seeing a better usage of their reports. So whatever works for you, make sure that that it flows, reduces friction in your office, and it reduces friction for your client to look at that invoice, and ultimately for the insurance company, if it's an insurance claim, as they're going to audit your invoice. So what you don't want to include with your invoice is your drawing report, your project summaries, which are probably sent, depending on your job flow, workflow, daily, every other day, and your project photos. And the reason why you don't want to submit these is, one, these items are probably already sent. Okay, I would think that most companies would communicate these things prior to sending out your invoice. Two, it can increase your audit friction when it comes time for your client or the insurance company to look at those. It just creates a big overload. Okay, those aren't part of the invoice. Your invoice is that backup for your time and material that proves you did that. Those things should be sent separate. Okay, so make sure you do not confuse the two and merge the two. If, let's face it, if you give your child a math sheet and that math sheet has 120 problems, and that child looks at that sheet and looks up at you, what's their first thought? It's a lot of work, isn't it? And they're not going to want to do it. They're not going to focus on it. Instead, they're more focused on the amount of time that it's going to take them to do those math problems. So what we're doing is saying, hey, here's 5 math problems. Focus on those because you already have the other stuff. If they request it again, fine, send it again, but keep it in a separate report and keep it separate from your invoice. Okay. Page numbering, I've already mentioned, is huge. Do not ever send out a time and material invoice, no matter how small, without page numbers, so that you can go back and reference those page numbers. They help reduce your audit friction. When you reduce your friction with your workflow, with your employees, with your own intercompany systems, it reduces friction then in auditing that invoice and looking at it. It will just continue to flow. Once you do that, you're going to decrease the amount of time it takes to actually get paid on that invoice, which is ultimately going to increase your net profit, which is what Amazon has done. Okay. Again, this is just a touch on documentation invoicing. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Dick and Bill both have all of my contact information. I look forward to going into more detail with this for you guys at a later date and in a different episode for Crest Network. Thank you for your time today, and God bless.